Chapter 17. Adulteration and the Black Market.
The wealth of the Piperaceae.
Black pepper is not merely a common culinary condiment. It is the physical manifestation of global economic desire. For millennia, the dried berries of the Piper nigrum vine have catalyzed maritime exploration, built vast mercantile empires, and funded wars across the globe. In the ancient world, the allure of this pungent spice was so profound that it functioned as a hard currency, traded ounce for ounce with precious metals. When the Visigoth king Alaric besieged Rome in 410 CE, he famously demanded a staggering ransom that included 3,000 pounds of pepper alongside vast quantities of gold and silk. The Roman encyclopedist Pliny the Elder frequently complained about the massive drain of wealth flowing to India solely to secure this biting flavour. Yet wherever immense wealth concentrates, elaborate commercial deception inevitably follows in its wake. The history of the international spice trade is inextricably linked to the history of adulteration, a process we must anchor and understand as a corrupted biological ledger. Whenever these valuable peppercorns changed hands along the arduous maritime and overland routes from the Malabar Coast to European markets, the temptation to artificially multiply their volume became irresistible. Dishonest merchants quickly realized that the visual identity of a spice could be easily manipulated to conceal worthless materials. This chapter chronicles the relentless high-stakes arms race between those who counterfeit the world's most valuable spice and the forensic authorities sworn to stop them. From the bustling aromatic docks of medieval Venice to the sterile high-tech laboratories of modern regulatory bodies, the primary battleground has constantly shifted. Counterfeiting operations evolved from the crude physical addition of street debris to highly sophisticated biochemical manipulations designed to fool advanced digital sensors. Policing the absolute purity of black pepper has therefore required continuous aggressive innovation in both legal frameworks and scientific methodology. To truly understand the integrity of the modern global spice trade, one must first understand the extraordinary lengths to which humans will go to fake it. Medieval fraud, the weight game. During the Middle Ages, the European obsession with black pepper reached its historical zenith, driving demand far beyond the available supply. The spice was utilized not only to flavor heavy roasted meats and disguise the taste of salt-preserved foods, but also served as a vital, highly trusted component in traditional apothecary medicines. Because the Arab and Venetian traders maintained a strict, unbreakable monopoly over the Indian Ocean supply routes, European consumer prices remained astronomically high. This artificial scarcity created an intense, undeniable economic incentive for widespread commercial fraud. Merchants realized that adding even a small fraction of worthless filler to a heavy sack of imported peppercorns could yield a massive, untraceable illicit profit margin. This deceptive practice initiated what regulatory historians consider the great weight game of the medieval spice bazaars. Unscrupulous grocers and traders actively sought out natural materials that mimicked the wrinkled, dark appearance of dried black peppercorns, but cost absolutely nothing to procure. The physical resemblance was the only metric that mattered before the advent of modern chemical testing. One of the most common early adulterants deployed by fraudulent merchants was the dried juniper berry. The unripe juniper possessed a vague visual resemblance to black pepper and had the remarkable, highly deceptive property of assuming the spice's pungent aroma when stored alongside it in closed barrels. By secretly mixing these cheap indigenous berries into their expensive inventory, traders could stretch a pure batch of pepper by 10 to 20% without alerting the casual, uneducated buyer. The perfect botanical mimic. When juniper berries proved insufficient or too aromatic, counterfeiters turned to even more visually deceptive botanical substitutes. Dried papaya seeds became an incredibly popular adulterant because they are nearly indistinguishable from genuine black peppercorns to the unaided human eye. While papaya seeds lack any real nutritional value and offer absolutely none of the characteristic heat of true pepper, their physical dimensions, dark color, and density made them the perfect hidden filler. This specific method of adulterating whole peppercorns was so highly effective that it remained a pervasive, unresolved problem in the global supply chain for several centuries. Even today, the visual sorting of papaya seeds from black pepper requires careful physical examination, often relying on the fact that papaya seeds will float in water while mature peppercorns sink. In the dim lighting of a medieval market stall, however, identifying this specific botanical fraud was nearly impossible for the average consumer. The corrupted biological ledger went entirely unnoticed, quietly draining the purses of the European working class. The lowest forms of deception, the most egregious offenders did not even bother with sourcing convincing botanical mimics. They simply swept the raw refuse of their warehouses directly into the spice sacks. Ground spices were particularly vulnerable to this type of primitive corruption because the heavy milling process permanently destroyed the natural visual indicators of the whole berry. Dishonest merchants frequently bulked up their expensive ground black pepper with literal floor sweepings, ordinary dirt, and common river clay. In the bustling, unregulated markets of 14th century Europe, it was not uncommon for a supposedly premium spice blend to secretly contain crushed vetch fines, sawdust, or even mouse droppings.
To maximize the deception for whole spices, some criminal artisans engaged in the labor-intensive production of factitious peppercorns, which were entirely fake berries manufactured entirely from waste materials. These counterfeit spices were meticulously rolled from a thick paste made of linseed oil cakes, common clay, and a minor dusting of cheap cayenne pepper to simulate the expected heat. The dark paste was pressed through mechanical sieves to achieve the exact granular size of a peppercorn, and then dried until it perfectly mimicked the hardened outer shell of the genuine spice. Such elaborate, time-consuming schemes perfectly underscore the massive financial rewards that awaited those who successfully manipulated the global spice trade.
Another highly mundane yet extremely profitable tactic for artificially increasing the weight of spices was to intentionally expose the sacks to high humidity or wet them down directly with unsafe water. Because pepper was sold strictly by the ounce, the absorbed water translated directly into unearned silver for the merchant, with a draconian policing of purity. To actively combat this rampant, economy-draining fraud, medieval guilds and city-states enacted incredibly harsh, uncompromising regulatory measures. The aggressive protection of the public from commercial fraud represents one of the earliest recorded forms of government market regulation in human history. In medieval England, the powerful grocers' company, originally chartered as the Guild of Pepperers, took it upon themselves to ruthlessly police their own errant members to maintain the lucrative trade. The guild appointed a specialized, highly feared official known as the Garbler of Spices. The official garbler was legally granted sweeping, uncontested authority by the Crown to forcefully enter any suspect shop, warehouse, or subterranean cellar during the daytime. The primary duty of the garbler was to sift, clean, and formally certify the purity of imported goods, forcefully separating the valuable spices from the dirt, leaves, and fraudulent fillers. The term garble itself originally derived from the Arabic word for sifting, highlighting the deep eastern roots of the trade and its necessary quality controls. The physical punishments for those merchants caught adulterating pepper were swift, public, and highly visible to the populace. In London, a strict municipal ordinance from 1393, initiated by Mayor John Hadley, mandated that any merchant caught selling dodgy, impure spices would be immediately sent to the city pillory. While locked helplessly in the wooden stocks, the offending merchant was subjected to the ultimate professional humiliation. His confiscated false powders were ignited and burned directly underneath his nose. On the European continent, the legal penalties for spice fraud were even more severe, reflecting the absolute critical importance of these commodities to local mercantile economies. In the powerful German trading hub of Nuremberg during the mid-15th century, municipal authorities instituted laws that made commercial adulteration a capital offense. Historical civic records from 1444 indicate that one man caught counterfeiting highly valuable saffron was publicly burned at the stake over a slow fire fueled entirely by his own adulterated product. The following year, 2 men and 1 woman found guilty of similar, repeated spice fraud offences were brutally buried alive. This draconian punishment was intended to serve as an absolute terrifying deterrent to any future counterfeiters operating within the city walls. The pivot from physical to chemical. As global maritime trade rapidly expanded and the scientific revolution dawned, the fundamental nature of food fraud underwent a permanent transformation. The policing authorities and their mechanical sieves became far too adept at spotting physical contaminants like clay, twigs, and sawdust, forcing the counterfeiters to innovate or perish. The ongoing, high-stakes arms race shifted entirely from the physical manipulation of raw weight to the invisible, microscopic realm of molecular chemistry.
To truly understand this technological transition, one must observe how the specific methods of commercial deception radically evolved over the centuries. In the 15th century, adulterating black pepper involved manually mixing in dried papaya seeds, floor sweepings, and unripe juniper berries to artificially increase the sack's physical weight without altering its appearance. In the 21st century, adulterating black pepper involves extracting the natural flavor compounds, selling the spent pepper biomass as filler, and masking the chemical theft by spraying the dead dust with chemically synthesized piperine to mimic the lost heat. This monumental, highly profitable shift in counterfeiting tactics required an equally monumental leap in forensic detection from the global regulatory bodies.
The basic visual inspections and physical sifting of the medieval garbler were entirely useless against an unseen adversary who could manipulate the chemical building blocks of the spice itself. The modern defense of the global food supply would soon require immensely powerful machines capable of reading the very atoms of the pepperberry. Modern food forensics, the chemical fingerprint. The modern war against economically motivated food fraud is fought in pristine, climate-controlled laboratories equipped with high-tech sensors capable of detecting chemical anomalies at the parts per billion level. Today, when a massive shipping container of ground black pepper arrives at a major international port, it is frequently subjected to advanced chemical testing designed to verify its absolute authenticity. At the very heart of this modern forensic arsenal is mass spectrometry, a complex technology you must immediately anchor as a molecular fingerprint reader. By actively ionizing the chemical compounds within a suspect pepper sample and measuring the precise mass-to-charge ratios of the resulting flying fragments, forensic scientists can identify the exact chemical constituents present in the spice. The primary target of these rigorous forensic investigations is piperine, the complex natural alkaloid responsible for the characteristic pungent bite of black pepper. Piperine is highly valuable not only for its intense flavor, but also for its lucrative pharmaceutical applications, including its proven ability to enhance the bioavailability of other therapeutic drugs in the human body. Because naturally grown piperine can be chemically extracted and sold at a massive premium to the dietary supplement industry. Fraudulent processors often strip the whole pepper of its valuable oils before secretly selling the leftover, flavorless biomass. To cover up this lucrative theft and fool the buyers, the processors then artificially spike the spent pepper dust with cheap synthetic piperine, created entirely in a laboratory. Detecting the illegal addition of this synthetic piperine is a massive forensic challenge, because the lab-created molecule is structurally and visually identical to the molecule grown naturally by the pepper vine. Reading the biological ledger. To expose this sophisticated biochemical fraud, forensic chemists rely on advanced isotopic analysis to establish an isotopic signature, a vital metric we must anchor as a geological barcode for the molecule. This highly advanced technique measures the subtle, naturally occurring variations in the weights of the atoms that make up the piperine molecule. Specifically, analysts focus on measuring the exact ratio of stable carbon-13 isotopes to the much more common carbon-12 isotopes present within the sample. The specific carbon isotope ratio, formerly known to chemists as the delta-13C value, provides an infallible, unalterable record of the molecule's true origin. Black pepper is technically classified as a C3 photosynthetic plant, meaning its specific biological method of fixing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere leaves a distinct, naturally depleted ratio of carbon-13 within its cellular tissues. In stark contrast, synthetic piperine is almost always manufactured using cheap petrochemical precursors derived directly from ancient fossil fuels or other inexpensive organic starting materials. These heavy industrial precursors possess drastically different delta-13C values compared to the natural botanical pathways utilized by the living Piper nigrum vine. When a forensic food chemist analyzes a suspect batch of pepper using isotope ratio mass spectrometry, they are effectively reading the plant's autobiography. If the delta-13C value of the extracted piperine matches the expected baseline for a natural C3 plant, the product is officially authenticated as genuine. However, if the mass spectrometer detects a skewed, unnatural isotopic ratio, lacking normal biological variance, the machine immediately flags the hidden presence of synthetic petrochemicals. Tracing the soil beyond merely ensuring the natural origin of the pungent alkaloids, modern mass spectrometry can also trace a single peppercorn back to the specific geographic plot of land where it was cultivated. This tracing capability is economically crucial because peppercorns grown in specific celebrated regions, such as the Malabar Coast of India or the central highlands of Vietnam, command premium prices protected by strict geographical indication laws. Fraudsters frequently attempt to maximize their profits by passing off cheap, low-grade pepper from unverified regions as premium single origin stock. To aggressively combat this geographical deception, regulators utilize a specialized tool called inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry, ICP-MS, to read the exact soil composition embedded deep in the plant's memory. As a pepper vine grows, its deep root system continuously absorbs dozens of trace elements and rare earth metals directly from the local soil and groundwater. Elements such as yttrium, thulium, praseodymium, strontium, and zinc slowly accumulate within the dense cellular structure of the developing peppercorn.
Because the geological composition of the Earth's crust varies dramatically from region to region, the specific concentration of these heavy metals creates a unique, highly localized chemical profile. The advanced ICP-MS machine vaporizes the pepper sample into a superheated argon plasma, allowing the forensic analyst to precisely identify and count these rare trace elements down to parts per billion. By actively applying complex chemometric algorithms to this raw elemental data, analysts can plot the results against a comprehensive global database of known agricultural soil profiles.
Your tin container labelled as premium Vietnamese black pepper displays an internal elemental ratio of zinc and rubidium that perfectly matches the soils of Brazil. The authorities immediately know the shipping manifests have been deliberately forged.
This hyper-specific geographic tracking technology has absolutely revolutionized supply chain transparency for regulatory bodies. It ensures that the celebrated terroir of the spice is finally as rigorously protected as its chemical purity, standardizing global trade, the cleanliness metrics. While mass spectrometry relentlessly hunts for invisible chemical deception, regulatory bodies must simultaneously wage an endless war against the physical filth that naturally infiltrates global agriculture. The long, complex journey from a humid tropical vine in Southeast Asia to a sanitized shaker on an American dining table exposes the raw spice to a massive array of environmental hazards. Birds, rodents, and insects all view large fields of drying peppercorns as a prime target for feeding or nesting, leading to inevitable continuous biological contamination. To effectively maintain the integrity of international commerce, the global spice industry required hard, unyielding rules to legally define exactly how much dirt was too much. Enter the American Spice Trade Association, ASTA, an influential organization dedicated to establishing a universal scientific standard for food safety. ASTA pragmatically recognized that completely eradicating all natural defects from open-air agricultural products was a physical and economic impossibility. Instead, they meticulously developed an ASTA cleanliness metric, a vital regulatory tool we must anchor as a global quality control threshold that dictates the absolute maximum allowable limits for specific macroscopic and microscopic contaminants. These highly stringent industry guidelines operate in strict tandem with the defect action levels, DALs, formally enforced by the United States Food and Drug Administration, FDA. The FDA defect action levels are surprisingly blunt, publicly available documents that detail the exact mathematical amount of unavoidable natural filth deemed legally acceptable for human consumption. If a commercial food product exceeds these specific numeric limits during routine port inspections, the regulatory agency legally considers the entire batch to be adulterated and subject to immediate enforcement action, seizure, or destruction. Policing these specific defect limits requires forensic analysts to meticulously sift through random samples using specialized extraction flasks, chemical solvents, and high-powered microscopes to visually identify and count the offending debris. The Arithmetic of Filth. The quantitative metrics established for ground black pepper are particularly fascinating, offering the public a stark, uncompromising glimpse into the gritty realities of agricultural processing. According to the federal FDA, DALs, a commercial batch of ground black pepper is deemed legally adulterated only if it contains an average of 475 or more insect fragments per 50 grams of the spice. This high numerical threshold means that a typical consumer seasoning their evening meal is routinely ingesting trace amounts of microscopic insect exoskeletons, wings, and antennae that were pulverized alongside the peppercorns during the commercial milling process. However, if the microscopic laboratory analysis reveals exactly 476 insect fragments, the entire shipping container is permanently flagged and barred from entering interstate commerce. The regulations concerning mammalian interaction with the spice supply are even more stringent and heavily monitored by port authorities. In many traditional pepper-producing regions across the globe, local farmers still dry their freshly harvested berries by spreading them out in the blazing sun on large woven bamboo mats. to cheaply preserve these traditional mats against the highly destructive, humid tropical climate. Local agricultural practices historically involve coating the bamboo in a thick protective paste made directly from cow dung. This ancient practice frequently resulted in the dried peppercorns becoming physically contaminated with dried, pulverized fecal matter before they were ever packed for export. To actively combat this specific, highly unsanitary vector of contamination, the ASTA cleanliness specifications explicitly target allowable limits for what the industry terms mammalian excreta. The established global threshold for whole black pepper is extraordinarily strict. The lot is legally considered adulterated if it contains an average of 1 milligram or more of mammalian excreta per pound of raw spice. Furthermore, the FDA mandates that finely ground black pepper must contain absolutely no more than 2 microscopic rodent hair fragments per 50 grams of product. This heavily policed metric ensures that severe warehouse infestations do not quietly make their way into the consumer food supply under the guise of an invisible powder, reconditioning the supply chain. When a massive multi-million-dollar shipment of imported pepper arrives at a customs facility and fails to meet these strict cleanliness metrics, the importing company faces an immediate, severe financial crisis. However, the regulatory frameworks provide a specific legal mechanism known as reconditioning to attempt to salvage the valuable commodity. If a lot fails due to excessive whole dead insects, loose animal hairs, or macroscopic foreign matter like stones and sticks, the owner can pay to have the entire shipment run through massive industrial sieves, high-powered air blowers, and magnetic separators. This exhaustive, highly expensive physical cleaning process acts as a massive, modern, mechanized version of the medieval garbler's sieve. Unfortunately for the merchants, some dangerous forms of biological contamination simply cannot be reconditioned away. If the microscopic analysis reveals excessive mold growth, specifically if more than 1% of the pepper pieces by weight are distinctly moldy or severely insect defiled, the structural and chemical integrity of the spice is compromised beyond repair. Mold infiltration often introduces dangerous, heat-resistant mycotoxins into the spice matrix, which cannot be blown away by an industrial fan or caught by an extraction magnet. In these severe instances, the global quality control threshold acts as an absolute, unyielding barrier to protect public health. The ruined cargo must be immediately destroyed in an incinerator or forcibly re-exported back to its country of origin entirely at the owner's expense. To proactively prevent these incredibly costly detentions, the modern global spice industry relies heavily on preventative strategies laid across the entire international supply chain. Organizations like ASTA strongly advocate for strict adherence to good agricultural practices GAPs at the local farm level. They actively encourage the use of modern synthetic drying mats or alternative sanitary pastes to completely eliminate the introduction of mammalian excreta directly at the source. Processing facilities are now federally mandated to implement Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point HACCP programs, utilizing advanced chemical pest control and rigorous sanitation protocols to keep rodents, birds, and insects entirely out of the production environment. The enduring value of purity, the long complex evolution of spice adulteration, perfectly mirrors the technological evolution of human industry itself. When the commercial world was measured entirely in physical weight and visual inspection, fraudsters successfully padded their burlap sacks with heavy river clay and visually identical dried papaya seeds. As civilization developed highly complex global trade networks, the governing regulations evolved to literally count the specific number of microscopic insect legs permitted per 50 grams of ground powder. Today, in an era largely defined by advanced biochemical engineering and opaque international supply chains, the battle line has been firmly drawn at the atomic level. Forensic chemists now spend their days meticulously mapping the precise isotopic ratios of synthetic molecules and tracking the elemental signatures of volcanic soils to ensure the corrupted biological ledger is finely balanced. Yet despite the vast technological chasm separating the medieval London Garbler of Spices from the modern forensic data analyst operating an ICP MS machine, their core fundamental mission remains entirely identical. They are both sworn defenders of the world's most valuable biological ledger. Black pepper built its immense world-shaping historical legacy on a simple promise of distinct, unadulterated flavor, a sharp, resinous bite that permanently transformed the culinary world.
As long as that unique flavor retains its high economic value, there will always be those who attempt to secretly replicate it for free. Consequently, there will always be dedicated scientists working tirelessly in the background to ensure that what we casually sprinkle on our food is truly the authentic king of spices.